Better luck this time.
Thank you. So the GreenStep program, they added GreenStep schools in 2020, which is a totally separate program run by a separate kind of steering committee and coordinator. So we won't talk too much about that today. And then finally, we launched the Gold Leaf Challenge in 2024. And the Gold Leaf Challenge encourages communities to take high impact climate actions. All these programs have in common is a shared model with a shared vision. So the vision of GreenStep is to normalize sustainability in every Minnesota community. And they're voluntary challenge, assistance, and recognition programs. So they challenge communities to take sustainable actions, assist them in doing that, and then recognize their progress. They provide statewide best practices for communities. And the best part is they are free and non-regulatory. So these are really kind of positive interactions with communities. GreenStep is run by a public-private partnership. So we do have a very small staff, and actually Kristen Rose is the kind of long-standing staff member, and actually just another staff member joined yesterday, Erica. And then they have had that Green Corps kind of extra assistance the past couple of years and will in the future. And then we have a lot of partners. So CERT's Clean Energy Resource Teams, Great Plains Institute, League of Minnesota Cities, Urban Lands Institute, and then of course like Commerce Department, MPCA, Environmental Quality Board, and the University of Minnesota, among others. There are 148 cities that participate in the GreenStep program and 4 tribal nations, which equal about 53% of the state's population. And they've taken almost 5,000 actions in just GreenStep and the GreenStep Tribal Nations programs since they were started. So GreenStep works by, it's a 5-step program. So the first step is to kind of have your community commit locally to joining the program. You have to adopt a city council resolution. The second step is to see what actions you've done in the past. And so you can implement between like 4 and 8 actions, and you can use past actions. Step 3 is additional actions, and then a couple really high impact sustainability best practices that are required that you do. Step 4 measures community-wide impact. So this is when we start to get benchmarking and emissions tracking and things like that. And also water use tracking and things like stormwater adaptation. And then step 5, you have to show demonstrated improvement. And communities really love the recognition. They get blocks. This photo is taken from the League of Minnesota Cities conference in Rochester. This is the a Rochester kind of delegation here and a little news article about GreenStep. So people do really love that recognition portion, and Rochester has completed 89 actions. So it's kind of fun to see. GreenStep has 29 best practice actions and 181 possible actions. So it's a menu of items that communities can take. And we really want communities to be able to see what is important to them, what their local community needs, and be able to fit GreenStep to that. So it's not like you have to do all of them. You can pick. Many of these are kind of indirectly related to water, such as efficient public buildings, efficient private buildings. There's some kind of conservation measures there, stormwater measures there, but most of the ones directly related to water practices are in this environmental management category. So stormwater management, surface water, efficient water and wastewater systems, septic systems, are the kind of the main ones. And there are a lot of actions, so we're not going to go through all of these, but there are, if you go on our website, you can search by related actions. So we have related actions under water conservation, which will bring up a list of 19 actions. And then under water quality, there's 46 specific actions. So we're just going to run through what a best practice action looks like. And so I picked one, best practice 19, surface water. So as you can see, there's 8 different actions you can take under surface water that go from monitoring surface water quality and clarity to community actions to ordinances. and flood insurance. So it's pretty wide ranging things people can do. Within each best practice action, there's also kind of compelling reasons why people should care about this, right? Like, why should your community want to protect surface water? And then an expert that can connect you, can help you implement these actions. And this was kind of an interesting fact I found, that a 3-foot decrease in water clarity for northern Minnesota lakes declines to a 22% decline in property value, which is 70%, $70 per shoreline foot. So we really try and link the best practice actions to things local communities might care about, like loss of, property values, things like that. So anyways, that was a fascinating fact I learned today. Within each individual action, there's some examples of how to implement them and tools. So we have 3 different star level examples. You can kind of, which is like good, better, and best. And then we have implementation tools. So this is one of the ways that GreenStep really links state programs, like especially within the DNR and MPCA, and makes those resources really easy for communities to find, especially in like smaller towns or people running towns. They just don't have experience, right, in all these different sustainability areas. So having those resources in one space is really helpful. And so, these guys pull in things from the state, national level, and also University of Minnesota. Then you have community examples. So we have a lot of two-star examples. There were some more 1 stars. No one yet has accomplished a 3-star in this category. But we want to do this because communities like seeing what other communities are doing. So this is a description of how Lake Crystal implemented a shoreline project. It talks about their partners, how they implemented it. And this is a report. So this is how communities report their actions like this. Here is an example of the array of actions one community has taken. And there definitely are those water and energy use in city buildings being tracked, but there's also GreenStep really defines sustainability broadly. So the downtown is a Minnesota Main Street community. That's kind of about a density and reviving those kind of Main Street communities, having a good quality of life in your town. We've got kind of native plantings and plant density, bike racks, anaerobic digesters. And you can see the actions that every community has taken on our website, so to get an idea of what communities are doing with sustainability. We also ask that communities ask some metrics once they get to step 4 and 5. So the areas where we have metrics tracking related to water are drinking water, green buildings, stormwater, wastewater, and surface water. These are some of the metrics we ask for in drinking water, residential gallons used per day. So it really gets communities thinking deeply about how they are using resources. And we do have some tracking. It's not perfect, but this is Golden Valley's stormwater infrastructure tracking. So it's kind of fun to see, to play around with this. And these are all located on our website. GreenStep has 2 other kind of cool tools. One is the Sustainability Index, which is a list of all the climate action plans around the state. And then the other is our resources. So we do host a lot of workshops, try and facilitate a lot of peer learning, do kind of a lot of sharing of stories. Communities love to see what other communities are doing. They don't necessarily want to hear from us, as at the state level always. And so we like to say, hey, look, you have a similar community and here's what they are doing. We also have some model ordinances and data benchmarking support. So now I'm going to talk about the Gold Leaf Challenge, which is what I helped to develop and launch. And I would describe it as kind of like a sister program or addendum to Gold Leaf. And it really came out of the GreenStep 2020 strategic plan. Our communities wanted help with climate action, and this is a way to provide a focused path with a limited number of high impact climate actions. Communities can join both. And this can almost be used as a climate action plans for communities that don't have them. As I said, this is a high impact, these are all high impact actions, high priority actions for local communities. And there's 44 different actions in the areas of climate mitigation, climate planning, climate adaptation, and then community connectedness. And not every sustainable action or important climate action is on here. We had someone be like, why isn't recycling on here? And it's like, well, recycling is really important, but we really wanted to narrow down climate actions in this program and focus on the most high impact ones. So in the Gold Leaf Challenge, you get different leaf awards for every single action you accomplish. So GreenStep, you're kind of moving through steps. In Gold Leaf, we want to drive action. So every single action you take, you get a little leaf award, and these are still templates, kind of mock-ups, but these are actually kind of, people use these as like wedding guest books, and people will write their names on the leaves. We thought it was a really fun way to track and actions also, and kind of be able to look at actions. So we've stolen this from the wedding industry, but this is our idea of what the awards will look like. So communities can receive a LEAF award if they accomplish a best practice action. We also wanted to integrate some of the other climate frameworks around the state and climate goals around the state into one program. Communities kind of have program overwhelm, and there's kind of a proliferation, especially in the climate space, of programs right now. So it was important to combine these into one space. So when communities achieve a goal set by the Minnesota Climate Action Framework, they can receive a gold leaf, which will be these fun little leaves here. Probably won't be gold, but they'll be more special. And then they can also achieve a gold leaf for if they accomplish a climate action in their own cities or local governments, like climate action plan or comprehensive plan that is related to the LEAF award. So basically what we wanted to do is say, we want you to accomplish high impact climate actions. We also want communities to be ambitious. And we have a lot of really ambitious communities in Minnesota doing a lot of great work on climate action. And so integrating these bigger, higher larger goals into Gold Leaf is a way to kind of reward communities doing a lot and recognize communities doing a lot of climate work and achieving these big ticket climate goals within the state and within their own communities. So much like GreenStep, we have action guides for every single, oh, sorry, my cat is making herself known here. So every single action has a guide. So I got the fun opportunity to develop these guides and really learned a lot about climate actions and the progress of making those. And they define the action and goals. What are those related actions, right? There's so much good information and examples already in GreenStep. We didn't want to duplicate GreenStep. So just kind of linking GreenStep and Gold Leaf, linking to the Minnesota Climate Action Framework, looking at potential outcomes. What can communities expect from these actions? Giving them resources and technical assistance. And then also reporting and metrics. How are communities supposed to report this? And then some examples. And I know this is a little bit small, but you can also see those 3 different ways to receive recognition in Gold Leaf that I just talked about. So for resilient public water systems, you can see here we have, if a community implements a strategy to reduce climate change risk and increase resilience for public water or wastewater operations, they would receive a LEAF award for that, for the lifetime of the building. And then we have these larger goals, right? So which are sometimes tangentially related, but both of these have to do with kind of climate action plans and adaptation projects. So, want to acknowledge that a local action contributes to Minnesota Climate Action Framework goals, and then also those goals from local communities, right? If they have a climate action plan and they have a local goal of becoming more resilient, accomplishing this leaf action would lead there as well. So trying to help communities tie things together. In comparing the two, there's a couple of differences. So both are voluntary free, but Gold Leaf is focused on high impact climate actions. GreenStep defines sustainability broadly. Gold Leaf is open to many communities. There's kind of talk about how we make sure like counties or townships or even HOAs. There's a lot of communities that have somewhat similar. HOAs have a lot of water needs, and they have water policies, right? Who is kind of reaching out to this group, and if someone was interested, we'd be open. Our main focus is still going to be cities and tribal nations here, but it is open to other communities, and we do have a regional development organization that has joined, which is fun. And then with GreenStep communities, it is city or tribal nations that can join. Gold Leaf rewards the volume of actions, where GreenStep is kind of that 1 through 5 steps you want to achieve. And Gold Leaf only really emphasizes new actions taken, where GreenStep is a good way to mark all the actions over time you've taken and receive recognition for those. Let's see. So there are some specific water actions in Gold Leaf. I highlighted ones that I felt, again, there's some ones that are tangential, right? Resilient growth has to do with water. Climate adaptation plans, risk plans absolutely have to do with water. Also, youth involvement. There's a lot of these community connectedness actions that are really great for water-related activities. We have some communities right now that have, use volunteer groups to restore shorelines, and have some youth involvement with like water monitoring and stuff like that. So there's some really fun kind of projects that you could accomplish, a community connectedness goal and another goal in the program. But then there are these highlighted in greens are more relevant, right? A FEMA rating, flood mitigation, drought tolerance, resilient public water systems. Those are the most water related actions. Right. So something else I have been working on this year and just comes up in kind of daily conversations with communities is, how do we help communities implement sustainable actions? And, Gold Leaf, I think, is always looking to how we can better support communities, especially small and rural communities, implement more sustainable actions. And so that's been one of my projects this year is looking how we can better do that. And one is kind of thinking about how we're talking to communities about sustainability and making sure we're connecting local priorities to sustainability. A lot of communities really care, right? They do want to do these things, but they don't have the resources to accomplish them, or they don't have the time, or there's other barriers to action like money and process processes that are too difficult to get through. Other people see sustainability as a secondary task to their main job of running local governments. So, I was on a tour of a solar farm, which was very cool, but someone there was like, it's hard to make people care about what they assume will be there. And, they were saying basically people assume energy is going to be there. So how do you get people to care about this? And the nice thing about water is that people already care about it, right? They care about having good recreation opportunities. They care about having healthy water, and agriculture and food, and they care about property values and having nice cabins to go to, and lake quality and things like that. It is so central to kind of our way of life here in Minnesota. So that is why water is such a good way to start conversations with communities about sustainability. And it's also something that people already feel emotional about, right? People are kind of emotional decision makers. So there is already that emotional connection to water and wanting to protect it. And so it's easier to connect like good water and sustainable water policies to local action because people want to do these things already. Um, so when we're thinking about communicating with people in cities and local cities, local tribal nations, um, I'm just going to use myself as an as an example. We're always looking how can we do a better job communicating what is complex information, right? There's so many sustainability topics. A lot of it is very technical. How do we communicate to people about sustainability, some of these technical concepts? And so, this is a PowerPoint for my first presentation as a legal aid attorney. I was very proud of this. I was trying to teach other attorneys about criminal expungement, but like 6 months later, not very long later, I looked at this and I said, this is an insane presentation, right? The text is so small. There's arrows, there's things being highlighted. This kind of white page right here, right? I was trying to teach people how to read criminal records. So there was like pages of criminal records with things crossed out. And I think looking back, I don't know if there's any, It's Sunny in Philadelphia fans here, but it really kind of reminded me of Charlie Day trying to explain like one of his theories to people. And that's not a situation you want to be in. I think like I'm passionate about, what I do. I love to get into the details. And I think when you're coming from that kind of technical background, it can be easy to go into like information overload or kind of start talking in a way that just is not approachable to other people and they kind of tune out. So this is my like don't do this kind of example. And just to tell you also about my communications journey, which I've really come to a point where I believe that communications and sustainability communications is so important. And if we don't kind of focus on that as a part of talking to other people about sustainability, our message is really lost. So some of the things I've kind of gained over this past year, sometimes they feel self-evident, but I think especially coming from that like technical background, I'm always trying to do more of this and learn how to be a better, more effective communicator. And do need to remind myself sometimes about these things. So when it comes to ultimately achieving kind of GreenStep's goal, and I think a lot of people working in this space is how do we normalize sustainability decision making in communities? How do we like let people know why the things we're talking about are really important? And so we do. It is fun when this works. We were just at the League of Minnesota Cities conference in Rochester, and the mayor of Eden Prairie came up and was like, everybody that comes before the city council now knows you have to talk about sustainability, like developers, staff people, things like that. So that is the goal. And there are places like that are really doing a good job of thinking about this. But there's also a lot of places that don't have that knowledge yet, or are still would like to, but just have some barriers, or they don't understand sustainability as part of their job. So that's the other side of this. Is in GreenStep we do have some people who will say, well, we couldn't focus on GreenSteps this year because we were doing development, and it's like, well, okay, we would like people to understand development as sustainability as really a part of development. And so as outside experts, we can help local people kind of gain that knowledge and understanding. And there's a couple different, I think, ways to do that effectively that I've kind of seen throughout the year. So one is that people really care about the places they love and they know them really well, and so they want to protect them. And so being able to talk about kind of risk assessments and adaptation in your work, if you're helping a community with a flooding project or stormwater project, talking about that greater risk from climate change and being able to factor that into the project and just helping to open the door to say, hey, we have strategies for mitigation. We have strategies for adaptation. You can help, protect your community just a little bit better by incorporating some of these kind of climate assessments and things. And, unfortunately, we have really kind of bad flooding around the state right now. And these are moments when you can kind of point to something and say, hey, this is a reality now. You can actually help protect your community by looking at some of this climate data, and maybe incorporating more adaptation, features into your project than you would have previously. Another one is just helping communities overcome barriers. I'm not sure what everyone's role here is, but when you do see them, these are really real for communities. Just small communities don't have the capacity of labor, time, often finances, and they struggle with difficult process. This is also something I saw, my legal aid job a lot, is process barriers are really real. So anytime you can help a community kind of overcome them, even with accessing grants and federal funding, talking about like, if someone wants to achieve a local climate project, they may not have the words to do that, right? Climate adaptation, climate mitigation, those are technical words. On the local community level, it's going to be, I want to protect my community from flooding, right? Or I want my wastewater plant to have backup energy in case there's a storm. And so helping communities understand kind of the language that we use around climate adaptation and mitigation and how they can use that to access grants and funding, and overcome other barriers is really important. There are also a lot of communities, as I said, that are thinking kind of sustainability as outside of the essential services that they provide. So one thing GreenStep is kind of always trying to do is making sure we are connecting sustainable actions to local priorities and showing how sustainability actually helps get those things done better. If you're worried about housing, how can doing some of those climate mitigation things ensure that housing is secure in the future? Or how can energy efficiency actions make it cheaper for your residents? Especially with renewable energy, cost is a really big, just talking about cost, right? You don't need to talk about climate change. You don't need to talk about sustainability. If the community you're working in cares about costs, like, great, talk about that. The other one is to also make sure the solutions you're offering are appropriate to that community's priority. I heard about a local community that was kind of working on some flood mitigation strategies. And one of the things that was offered to them as a solution was to tear down Section 8 housing that was in a really high flood prone area. And that just isn't a solution for a community, right? Most communities are worried about needing to build more housing, and tearing it down is just not going to happen. So ensuring that the solutions we're offering to towns are feasible and aligned with their priorities. Another one, which again, I don't totally know what people do here, but if you ever have the opportunity to just like help a community put sustainability in their processes or like job work plans, that's great. If people don't have to think about sustainability, they just do it. They'll just execute their job, and then sustainability gets done. So like putting sustainability goals in capital improvement projects, as I said, job kind of duties. I was talking to a consultant once who was like, get in the engineer's spreadsheets. So really you can get really granular with this, but when you have that opportunity to help someone think a little bit more about sustainability on a daily basis, or help them use a climate risk assessment tool, adding that to one of the tools they use regularly, that's a really good way to normalize sustainability. This tip was one I got from someone who works on climate communications in areas where it's not always politically popular to talk about climate. And one thing she said was to let people lead kind of the conversation and how you talk about the issues that you're trying to accomplish in the community. So a lot of people have different levels of knowledge. Some people come in with a technical knowledge, but you might not agree on why something needs to be accomplished. Or you might have that kind of similar agreement with someone, right, about why something needs to be accomplished, but may not have, you may have the technical language and the person you're talking to, it doesn't have that. So she used this concept of kind of giving up control of the technical language as a subject matter expert and just really respecting the other person's kind of knowledge and where they're coming from. And I liked that concept, just of like, I think coming in as an expert, it can be really easy to kind of say, well, this is how we use language and describe the issue in the expert community. So that was an interesting kind of concept to me and something I liked. The final one is just kind of take action. In Morris, Minnesota is kind of the classic community of a community that's taking a lot of sustainable actions, but isn't in an area that necessarily politically supports like climate action. And there was just an article actually in the Wall Street Journal about them and how much kind of progress they've made on climate action. And in talking to their sustainability coordinator, they said, just take action, right? Just do the thing. It doesn't have to be big. You can start small. But there's no need to kind of get bogged down in terminology or why someone's doing that, as long as you are accomplishing that thing. I wanted to end on an example that I thought of just kind of ties everything together, which is Woodbury's award-winning WWWIP program. I did not write down what that stands for, unfortunately, but it is their new water conservation program. So they just won the League of Minnesota Cities Sustainability Award this year, which recognizes a really great sustainability effort by a GreenStep city. And Woodbury is one of our Step 5 communities. So this program came about because Woodbury's population is growing and they want to make sure that they are doing that sustainably, especially around water and water conservation. So they brought together a really interdisciplinary effort of city public works, environmental engineering, and planning divisions, who researched kind of best practices around the nation and then kind of talked to their community too, to see what their community wanted, and created this 8-pronged program to help conserve water. And it is kind of cool. A Green Corps member this year helped to research and implement that program. So I thought this was a great ending example of how a community has normalized sustainability decision-making within their community. So I think we have time for some questions or sharing, and I put up some kind of topics to throw out there, but also totally open to anybody's questions or things they would like to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eliza. That was a great presentation.
Great presentation. So if anyone has any comments or questions, throw them in the chat and we'll get to them. Just in the meantime, I have a question for you, Eliza. Yeah, I didn't really understand what GreenStep program was, and now I know, and it's really interesting. I'm kind of thinking, I bet a lot of city council, planners and developers and so forth have the impression that sustainability and ecological awareness, those kind of things, are a nice add-on, but they see them as an add-on after other things have been planned. And the challenge comes in trying to get planners and developers and engineers to actually incorporate it right from the get-go. Is that a right perception? Is that kind of one of the big challenges?
I think so. And I think, as I said, some communities do kind of really get that sustainability is something you need to start with. Others want to, but they don't have that technical know-how. And another thing is there is like this whole kind of suite of like sustainability services. So you have consultants, engineering firms, all these people giving, MPCA, GNR, all these people giving advice and helping communities execute projects. So if the engineering firm you're working with isn't, using what is their like stormwater risk assessment, right? So like if they're not gonna say, if they're not using like the most recent modeling how do you help a community like make sure that they're getting that. So some of it is that communities aren't thinking about it. Some of it is that it is like a whole system, and so we need to help make sure communities are getting that kind of information they want when it comes to sustainability from us, right, at the NPCA, and then also all those other services out there.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Also, feel free if you're brave and you want to unmute. That's also welcome. Otherwise, if there are no additional questions, we can go ahead and wrap up a little bit early today.
I have just one question. You were, and thank you for the talk. It's really was a great talk. I am tangentially involved in the GreenStep program, but honestly haven't had enough involvement. This was a great introduction to it as well for me. But I was curious about, you were talking about building sustainability into like a job description, or maybe it was procedures and such. Do you have any like concrete examples of that? I'd be really interested.
Yeah, I think this is something we're starting to explore more. And so there's a couple methods you could go about doing it, right? One is you have a sustainability coordinator who then in a city who then helps different areas of public works and things work on sustainability. Or the other one is kind of think about how can you embed sustainability within every single division. And so it's let me maybe rephrase this. I'm going to restart my answer to you. I think it could come in a lot of different ways. So putting, metrics someone needs to reach in their job description. If you're, reducing greenhouse gases, reducing miles driven as kind of things you need to hit within your job as part of your work plan, things like that. Other ones could be, financing. How are we financing setting money aside for sustainable actions within communities? And then with, I don't have an engineering background. I was talking to a consultant who kind of brought up some of these ideas, but how do you get into the public works department and how are they coming out, or like engineering departments, how are they coming up with their solutions? And this consultant was like, you need to get into their spreadsheets. So I think this really would be helpful if you have that subject matter expertise, how other experts are coming to their conclusions. So what are the ways that you can really get into those decisions and help people just kind of not have to make sustainability an extra thing, but as part of the work? So I think we're still exploring what that looks like, but it's something I'm definitely thinking about, and I think everybody knows their area of expertise best. And so I think you would probably know how you could help other communities do that best as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice. I feel like as soon as I say, all right, let's wrap up, somebody always has a question. So just want to give everyone a minute. But otherwise, if there isn't anything else, thank you so much, Eliza. It was a really great presentation. We really appreciate you hanging with us through the technical difficulties. They can be frustrating, but I'm glad we figured it out.
We got through it.
We did.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. I feel like I learned a whole lot about applying what it is that we talk about on a level where it's, makes a difference. So it's really interesting to see that, and inspiring too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. We will let you go 2 minutes early. Thanks again, Eliza.
I
Yep. Bye-bye.